Picture this. It's the late 1960s. NASA's Apollo program has just landed humans on the moon, beating the Soviets in the ultimate Cold War showdown. Neil Armstrong's "one small step" echoes around the world. But what if NASA didn't stop there? What if, instead of winding down Apollo, they aimed higher, much higher? Imagine astronauts soaring past the red planet, Mars, in a spacecraft built from the same rocket that took us to the moon. Sounds like science fiction? It almost happened. Welcome to Bound to Mars. Today, we're diving into a bold alternate history, a manned Mars flyby using Apollo hardware, and a wild idea called the wet workshop. Let's set the stage. It's 1969. Apollo 11 has made history, and NASA's riding high. The Saturn V rocket, a 36-story-tall beast, is the most powerful machine ever built, capable of hurling 48 tons to the moon. But some visionaries like rocket legend Wernher von Braun were already looking beyond the lunar surface. Mars, the red planet, was the next frontier. Why Mars? It's our closest planetary neighbor with a surface that screams adventure. Volcanoes, canyons, maybe even signs of ancient life. But in the 1960s, Mars was a distant dream. Or was it? NASA's Apollo Applications Program, or AAP, was brainstorming ways to stretch Apollo's tech for bigger missions. One idea? A manned flyby of Mars. Not landing, just looping around and coming home. No boots on the ground, but a daring human journey to another planet. The catch? Apollo was built for short lunar trips, not year-long interplanetary voyages. To make this work, NASA needed a game changer. Enter the wet workshop, a crazy, brilliant plan to turn a spent rocket stage into a space habitat. So, what's a wet workshop? Picture the Saturn V's third stage, the S4B. It's a giant cylinder, 6.6 meters wide, 36 meters long, with a massive hydrogen tank inside. Normally, it burns its fuel to send Apollo to the moon, then gets discarded, crashed into the moon or flung into solar orbit. But what if we kept it? What if after it's done its job, we turned that empty fuel tank into a living space for astronauts? That's the wet workshop. Here's how it'd work. You launch the S4B with just enough fuel for a Mars trajectory. Once the fuel's burned, astronauts vent the leftover gases, climb inside the tank, and set up shop. We're talking floors, sleeping quarters, a galley, maybe even a tiny gym. 300 cubic meters of space, way roomier than Apollo's cramped command module. This wasn't just a pipe dream. NASA studied it in the 1960s for space stations and even tossed it around for Mars or Venus flybys. The wet workshop had big advantages. First, it saved weight. You're reusing a rocket stage in space. Second, it used Apollo's proven hardware, keeping costs down. The S4B's aluminum walls even offered some protection against radiation, a huge deal for a Mars trip. NASA tested similar ideas for Skylab, America's first space station, though they went with a dry workshop, an S4B outfitted on the ground. The wet workshop? It was riskier, but totally doable with 1960s tech. Let's design our Mars flyby. It's 1973, and NASA greenlights a mission for 1975, when Earth and Mars align perfectly. We're doing this with a single Saturn V launch, souped up with upgraded F-1A engines. These beasts, an improved version of the Saturn V's first stage engines, pack more thrust, 1.8 million pounds each, up from 1.5 million, boosting the rocket's payload to around 55 tons for a Mars trajectory. That's enough to send an S4B wet workshop, partially fueled, and an upgraded Apollo Command Service Module, or CSM, with extra life support and a propulsion module for course corrections, all in one go. In Earth orbit, the crew activates the S4B, vents the residual propellants, and starts converting the hydrogen tank into a habitat. The CSM, beefed up with advanced air and water recycling, stays docked as the command center and re-entry capsule. This single launch setup saves billions compared to multiple launches, making the mission more sellable to Congress. The S4B becomes the main living quarters. Picture a crew of 3 or 4 astronauts with room to stretch, run experiments, and stay sane for a 1.5-year journey. The hydrogen tank is fitted with air recycling, water purifiers, and food storage. Think MREs for a year. Solar panels or fuel cells power the ship. The CSM stays attached as a lifeboat and re-entry capsule for the return to Earth. Now, the trajectory. It's a Hohmann transfer orbit. Think of it as the most fuel-efficient path to Mars. Launch in 1975. reach Mars in about 6 months, zip past at 10,000 kilometers, and use Mars's gravity for a slingshot back to Earth. Total trip, 12 to 18 months. The crew doesn't land, but they've got cameras, spectrometers, and sensors to study Mars's atmosphere, moons, and maybe even hunt for signs of water or life. The science payoff? Huge. A flyby could map Mars in detail, beating the early Viking orbiters. Astronauts could tweak experiments in real time, spotting things robots might miss, like weird atmospheric patterns or volcanic activity. Plus, the human factor. Imagine the first humans seeing Mars up close, broadcasting to a world glued to their TVs. Sounds amazing, right? But this mission wasn't a walk in the park. First, the duration. Apollo missions lasted 2 weeks max. This is a year and a half. Zero gravity for that long means muscle loss, bone weakening, and serious health risks. The crew would need exercise gear, maybe even a spinning spacecraft for artificial gravity, but that tech was barely studied in the 60s. Then there's radiation. Mars is farther from the sun than Earth, so solar flares are less intense than a Venus trip. But cosmic rays are a constant threat. The S4B walls help, but you'd need a storm shelter, maybe a water-lined closet, for big solar storms. That adds weight, and every kilogram counts, even with those F-1A engines. Life support was another hurdle. Apollo systems were open loop. Use it, lose it. A Mars flyby needs closed-loop tech. Recycling air, water, even waste. NASA was working on this for Skylab, but scaling it for 18 months was untested. One glitch, and the crew's in trouble, with no quick way home. And don't forget the human factor. A year in a metal tube, even a big one, tests your sanity. Apollo's command module was like a minivan. The S-4B's better, but it's still cramped. The crew would need training for isolation, conflict, and boredom. Oh, and converting the S-4B in orbit, that's a high-stakes spacewalk with no room for error. Finally, the cost. Apollo cost $25.4 billion in the 60s, about $150 billion today. A Mars flyby, even with a single launch, could hit $30 billion or more. With Vietnam, civil unrest, and a shrinking NASA budget, Congress wasn't exactly eager to fund a Red Planet road trip. So why didn't we go? The short answer: politics and priorities. Apollo was a Cold War flex. Beat the Soviets to the moon, win the space race. Once that happened, the public lost interest, and NASA's budget tanked. By 1970, it was down to 1% of federal spending. Saturn V production stopped, and Apollo 18, 19, and 20 were canceled. No rockets, no Mars. Robots didn't help either. The Viking probes, launched in 1975, landed on Mars for a fraction of a crewed mission's cost. They sent back stunning photos and data. No humans required. Why risk lives and billions for a flyby when robots could do it cheaper? The wet workshop itself was a gamble. Converting a fuel tank in space sounded cool, but was untested. Skylab went with a safer dry workshop, and even that was a stretch. Plus, Apollo 13's near disaster in 1970 spooked NASA. A Mars mission, with no backup 140 million miles from Earth, was too risky for the 70s. Imagine if it had happened. A 1975 Mars flyby would have been a game changer. Picture astronauts beaming back live footage of Mars's canyons and volcanoes, inspiring a generation. The science, early maps of Phobos and Deimos, atmospheric data, could have fast-tracked our understanding of Mars. The wet workshop, powered by a single F-1A, upgraded Saturn V, might have led to modular space stations or deep space habitats sooner. It could have kept Apollo alive, pushing NASA toward Mars landings in the 80s or 90s. Instead, we got the space shuttle. Great for Earth orbit, but no red planet. The wet workshop idea lived on, though, influencing the International Space Station and modern plans like SpaceX's Starship. Today, NASA's Artemis program is eyeing the moon again, with Mars as the long-term goal. Private companies like SpaceX are racing to get there, maybe by the 2030s. The Apollo Mars flyby was a bold dream, grounded in real tech but sunk by budgets, risks, and politics. The wet workshop, launched by a single upgraded Saturn V, showed NASA's ingenuity, turning a rocket into a home among the stars. While it never left the drawing board, it reminds us what's possible when we dare to aim big. So, what do you think? Could Apollo have taken us to Mars? Should we revive the wet workshop for future missions? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more space adventures. Until next time, keep looking up. The red planet's waiting.